Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. Today's episode is a classic 2-week forecast, and I'll be taking a look at the astrological highlights of the 2-week period beginning August 31st and running through until September 13. So we will be looking at a couple of important astro events in the first 2 weeks of September. That means I'm going to be talking about the new moon in Virgo, which is happening on September 2nd or 3rd, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to be talking about the strong Earth influences in early September and where they are coming from. I'm also going to take a look at Mars moving into Cancer, which happens on September 4th or 5th. And one of my favorite planetary sign changes for September, which is Mercury moving into Virgo. We're looking forward to September 9th for Mercury moving into Virgo. So there are a lot of important shifts and astro events happening in this first 2 weeks of September. Before I get further into breaking down these current astro themes, I want to tell you about my upcoming astrology webinar, which is all about a planet in exaltation. On September 14, I'll be exploring the gifts and the potential of a planet in exaltation, including tips on how to work with a planet in exaltation. This is the third in a series of webinars that I'm doing in 2024, all about planetary strength or weakness by its sign placement. You can find out more about this webinar on planets in exaltation, or you can register over at my website, kellysastrology.com. So with that message out of the way, let's dive in to talking about this new moon in Virgo. So first up, some details and some specifics. So the new moon in Virgo is happening at 11 degrees Virgo. It will be on Monday, September 2nd, if you're in Canada and the US. If you're in other places like Europe, the UK, or Australia, the new moon in Virgo for you is going to come through really strongly on Tuesday, September 3rd. So this new moon is a fairly reasonable new moon. And so it is going to be a decent time for new beginnings. These new beginnings have a level of weightiness, or they can feel more significant. And I'm going to talk about why in just a moment. Before we get into breaking down the chart of this new moon in Virgo, I do want to make a mention that this will be our last lunation before we dive into eclipse season. So the new moon in September is a regular new moon. The full moon in September is actually a lunar eclipse. I'll be talking about that in a future video in a couple of weeks. So make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to this podcast so you'll get notified of future episodes. But we don't have a new moon or a full moon that isn't an eclipse after this new moon in Virgo until late October. And so if you are somebody who likes to set new moon intentions, or you have rituals or other magical practices that you like to do with the new and full moon, you're going to want to get all of those in around this new moon in Virgo, because eclipse lunations, so a full moon eclipse or a solar eclipse, they're not great for that kind of regular intention setting. So if you don't do it under this new moon in Virgo, that's okay. You're going to leave it until late October. So I wanted just to mention that. And that adds a little bit of sort of that time pressure of we've got to get it done now because we may not get another time soon. And that quality goes into this new moon in Virgo. So there are lots of different things we could say about this new moon in Virgo, but I think there's two really key planetary signatures that come into this new moon that are important to mention. The first one is that this new moon at 11 Virgo is opposite Saturn, which is at 16 Pisces. So the new moon is in Virgo, an earth sign, and it is opposite Saturn. Now, Saturn is in a water sign right now. It's transiting through Pisces. But the core essence of Saturn is that it is an earthy planet. It is cool in its nature. And it's very grounding and very stabilizing. And so here's where we get this strong emphasis on qualities of the earth element coming in the early part of September. We've got the sun moving through Virgo, an earth sign. We're going to have the sun and Saturn make an opposition. That actually comes to a peak around September 8th, but the opposition is kind of baked into the new moon. And so we get about this 2-week period of new moon opposite Saturn energy, which brings in a lot of Saturnian themes about this new moon. It brings in the reality check, this idea that we're seeing things as they are. We're seeing things for the truth of the matter. We're not seeing things in an overly optimistic way. We are being more pragmatic. We might be cautious. We might even be a little hesitant. The new moon in Virgo is a new moon that is analytical and thinking in its orientation. So we're assessing, we are researching, we're pulling in data and information. And Saturn is helping us kind of find our way through the facts to a choice or to a structure that is going to be sustainable or manageable over a long period of time. So the new moon in Virgo opposite Saturn is going to bring in a little bit of a check-in around some of those longer plans and priorities that you're working on. So the emphasis that's coming into the new moon via Saturn is going to highlight long-term objectives. It's also going to help you clarify your priorities. You're going to be thinking about who or what really matters. You're going to be questioning or examining, how am I spending my time? Who am I giving my time and my energy to? And are those people or those projects really important for me in the long term? Like, will those people or those projects matter 5 years from now? And if the answer is yes, you've kind of got the cosmic seal of approval to keep going. If the answer is no, that may prompt you to question whether that is an obligation or a priority that you want to continue with. Because this is a new moon, we are thinking about beginnings and fresh starts. Because we have Saturn in the mix, we're thinking about, what do I need to end, close, or shrink down so that I can keep going with what's really important. So we're going to find ourselves dealing with some turning points, or maybe at a little bit of a crossroads where we're thinking about endings as much as we're thinking about beginnings. The nature of Virgo and the influence of Saturn brings in a very practical, very grounded energy. So we're really kind of sort of playing it safe, but we're also thinking in very realistic terms. Have I got the time for this, the energy? Have I got the resources or the money? And if not, we're reassessing, we're restructuring. It's a new moon in Virgo. It's asking for you to think about simplicity. It's definitely got organizational themes. And Virgo is about simplifying or streamlining. It's about improving efficiency by actually doing less. So we're thinking about how to be more organized, how to be more specific with what we're doing, and we're figuring out how to manage distractions so that we can stay on track. So that's the Saturn involvement with the new moon. And that's a lot about the long-term energy, the serious nature of this new moon, where some of the cautious energy is coming from, but also that very practical, I want to put my energy into things that I can see and taste and touch and feel. We're dealing with the very material parts of our lives, our stuff, our finances, those very earthy matter type topics. But there's a different planet and another quality of energy that comes in to this new moon in Virgo. And that comes via the ruler of the new moon, which is Mercury. And here we get a totally different vibe. The new moon ruler is Mercury. And at the time of this new moon, Mercury is at 23 Leo. And Mercury has just stationed direct. And so Mercury itself is in this get back on track mode. And so between Mercury stationing direct, which is a bit like a pushing forward or a renewal energy for Mercury, add that into the new moon, and we really have this sense of either getting back on track with things that you have been, disorganized or delayed with, or getting a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm for that fresh start. Now, the new moon ruler Mercury is in Leo. So that's helping bring in a vision, sort of an image, something that you're aspiring to, that you want to move towards. You might also, because Mercury in Leo is in the 12th position to the new moon in Virgo, you might also find that you're sorting out a fear or a worry that has been acting like a block inside you. And so as we untangle some of our kind of inner stuff where we get a little bit twisted inside ourselves, as that gets untangled, we're better able to be clear, be decisive, to make a decision, and then to put plans into action. So the ruler of the new moon, Mercury, being in a fire sign does help with some energy, with some motivation, and with a little bit of a confidence boost as well. Now, Mercury is moving towards a square with Uranus, and that aspect will peak around September 7, but it's part of the new moon chart, so it's part of the new moon experience. And that Mercury-Uranus aspect is about innovation. It's about restlessness and wanting change or being ready to shake things up. So that rebellious spirit of Uranus comes in to this new moon via its square aspect to the new moon ruler Mercury. And that is going to bring a little bit of an unpredictable or surprising element in. Whether you experience this around the day of the new moon, September 2nd or 3rd, or in the 4 or 5 days following the new moon, it is definitely a time where sparks are flying, unexpected developments are occurring, but you feel ready for them, or you're excited by the changes that are coming forward. So this new moon has got a lot of different themes in it, and it is going to jumpstart some things. It's going to clarify why we need to end other things, and it is certainly going to help with a shift in perspective and that classic kind of reset, which we all love from a new moon. So there's lots of insights about the new moon. So hopefully that will help you tuning into the current themes that are coming up. They're important on the day of the new moon, but also remember for the 2 weeks following. Now, in those 2 weeks, we have 2 planets that are going to change signs. Let's first talk about Mars, which is moving into Cancer. That is Wednesday, September 4th. Unless you're in Australia, that will be Thursday, the 5th of September. Now, why is Mars coming into Cancer important? Mars is going to spend an extra long time in Cancer. This has to do with Mars ultimately having a retrograde later this year, which will be partly in the sign of Leo and partly in the sign of Cancer. So instead of our usual 6 weeks of Mars in Cancer, we're going to get many months of Mars in Cancer. For now, Mars is coming into Cancer, and Mars will stay in Cancer for 2 months until early November. Then Mars will pop into Leo for just a couple of months. And by the time we get to early January, Mars is back in Cancer, and Mars will be in Cancer from early January to late April. So over, the next number of months, Mars is going to be in Cancer more than it is in any other sign. So we're all going to get a little bit of a deep dive onto what Mars in Cancer looks and feels like, what it might bring forward collectively, and what it could mean for each of us personally. So if we look at Mars in Cancer, it's important to understand that this is technically the fall placement for Mars. And so what we're working with here is a moody kind of Mars. Mars is in a water sign, and one of my taglines for this is that mood affects motivation. What this means is that we have this fluctuating quality around our energy, our drive, our sense of confidence, or even our connection to being courageous and brave. Mars is in a water sign, but it's also in the only water sign ruled by the moon, which we know is a planet that indicates fluctuations. So with Mars in Cancer, we're going to be thinking about this idea of catching those waves of motivation and enthusiasm when they come in, and then we're going to be embracing the lull in between those peaks. If you've ever surfed, or you've ever body surfed, or you've spent time just watching the waves roll in at the beach, you will know that we tend to get waves coming in sets or series, and we have a few waves, and you have a good chance of catching one of those. I body surf, and so it's such a great ride. It's so easy to move from where you are in the ocean all the way to the shore when you catch that wave at the right moment. And then after the set rolls in, there is a lull. There's a period where we don't get any waves for a little while, or the ones that are coming in are much smaller. And so having Mars in Cancer is a little bit like our mood or our energy or our sense of determination is like these sets of waves. We get peaks of them, periods of them, and then we have these quiet interludes. So we want to understand that so that we can manage our expectations in terms of our activities and our outputs while Mars is in Cancer. And a different way of saying this is we're all going to need more breaks and more rest in between like frenetic periods of activity. Mars in Cancer can be very reactive, so it can get very fired up or it can get really charged about things. And then it kind of goes a little bit on the warpath. And then it runs out of steam or puff, or the emotion has been expended and we calm down. So, this idea of fluctuating motivation or mood affecting our motivation is a huge part of Mars in Cancer. Because this is technically the fall placement of Mars, we do have a little bit of an unstable or unsettled quality to Mars. And I think one thing we'll all be learning while Mars is in Cancer is how do you buffer yourself in periods of uncertainty? How do you care for yourself or protect yourself when things are kind of unknown for a period of time? So we want to keep that in mind. Now, one thing I've seen a lot with Mars when it is in a fall placement or even a detriment placement is that we get this sort of willing to fight for the underdog energy, or we're willing to protect the defenseless. So Mars in Cancer has a very strong protective drive and may bring forward energy or themes and topics around advocacy for those who are able to fight for themselves. So with Mars in Cancer, we've got lots of themes about safety, about stability, about things like food and families, about what's working, but also what's going wrong in some of these areas. That's sort of a collective focus, thinking about Mars in a sign ruled by the moon. But because of that fall placement, we are thinking about, you see this Mars in Cancer or even Mars in Libra in charts of people who become very outspoken, very passionate advocates for people with certain challenges or restrictions, certain sort of shortcomings that they need extra support to help them overcome. And so we're going to be thinking, each of us, about what we might want to contribute to if we're in a position to do so, as a way of channeling that protective energy of Mars in Cancer. We will all have to be working on our reactive tendencies because Mars in Cancer feels things. It's so sensitive that it can fire up really quickly. So that idea of quick to anger, quick to feel hurt, quick to feel attacked, we're going to have to think about that. Who do we feel attacked by? Why do we feel attacked? Is this a clue that we don't feel safe with this person or in this situation? So we're going to all be learning a little bit more about emotional regulation to do with Mars things like anger, hurt, betrayal, those types of Marsy feelings. One way to tune into Mars in Cancer personally is to really get to know the topics of the Cancer part of your personal birth chart. Is this an area of your life where you feel well nourished, where you feel that you can do the things that you want to do? And if not, why not? So Mars in Cancer, on the one hand, can help reveal or draw our attention to what is maybe a bit wobbly or unsteady around the topics of the Cancer part of our chart. And then that's going to help us work through over the many months, between now and November, and then again in the first quarter of 2025, the many months that Mars is in Cancer, we're going to be figuring out that buffering. What helps me stay safe here? How can I advocate on behalf of myself? How can I be clear on what my needs are? how can I acknowledge that I do have some needs? And so we've got some strength in vulnerability themes of Mars in Cancer. So there are lots of ways we can connect to this personally by really tuning in to the topics of the Cancer part of our chart and knowing that we're going on a bit of a deep dive over, the period from now till mid-April of 25. We're going to be learning about how we feel safe and satisfied around the Cancer part of our chart. And we're also going to be drawing our attention to or becoming alert to where we sometimes feel threatened or unsafe, or where we can be quick to anger or quick to hurt around that part of our chart as well. So lots of important emotional themes with Mars coming into Cancer. And you will definitely notice that as a mood shift in this first week of September. Mars has been in Gemini for 6 or 7 weeks, where Mars is quite outgoing, it's very social, it's very extroverted. Mars in Cancer is more quiet, reflective, can even get into ruminating. Mars in Cancer is going back to the past as well. So we're thinking about what has happened, what's already gone on, and how do we need to maybe digest or process the emotions that we still have about past events. So that's Mars in Cancer. And a few days later, we have one of my favorite astro shifts for September, which is Mercury coming into Virgo. So Mercury will be in Virgo starting Monday, September 9 for about 2.5 weeks, September 9 until September 26. On September 26, Mercury moves into Libra, and that's a conversation for another day. So the key part we're looking at here is September 9 to 26 when Mercury is in Virgo. Now, Mercury is really unique in that its rulership sign of Virgo is also its exaltation sign. There's no other planet that has this kind of double strength in Virgo or anywhere, to be honest. So in Virgo, Mercury is both resourced via rulership and elevated by reputation according to its exaltation placement. So we've got this sort of double good or super effective Mercury for the next couple of weeks. So in general, Mercury in Virgo, this is the time you want to do all the things that you maybe are told not to do when Mercury is retrograde, which means it is a great time to organize. It's a great time to book travel, book tickets, lock in plans. You might be buying or updating technology. If you have to upgrade software or buy new devices, Mercury in Virgo, excellent for doing that. You're going to be submitting important paperwork or documents. You might be organizing your paperwork, decluttering, filing, shredding or burning. We're going to simplify all of those mercurial things in our lives. We're going to be thinking about decluttering because I promise you that Mercury in Virgo is definitely a no muss, no fuss kind of placement. We're simplifying, but we're making more efficient. So this is definitely the idea of less is more. Do you really need 10 different kitchen gadgets? Are you actually using them? Can you kind of just focus on the 1 or 2 gadgets that you actually use and the rest you are donating, or maybe you're relocating out of your everyday space? Anything that you want to organize, whether it is your bookshelf, your filing cabinet, your wardrobe or your closet, your garage, your garden shed. These are some of the things we have to organize in our house. This is a great time to do it. So Mercury in Virgo is super practical. It's almost even better than some of those new moon Saturn themes that I was talking about at the top of the show, because Mercury is so analytical and so clear. Mercury is logical. You're going to have factual conversations. You're going to make really grounded decisions. Mercury in Virgo is also an excellent problem solver. And so if you need to come up with a solution, now is going to be the time for that to happen. Whether the solution is something you have to negotiate with other people, whether it's a decision you need to make about something in your space, Mercury in Virgo is here to help. So Mercury in Virgo is analytical. This is very intellectual, but it's very discerning. Mercury in Virgo can really hone in on that's going to work, that's not going to work, or this little tweak is going to make this 100 times better. So we're really in a very grounded place. We've got this factual kind of logical quality coming through with Mercury in Virgo. And it is just going to be really helpful for all kinds of communication, technical technology things, and for matters to do with transport, travel, and logistics. Now, Mercury is going to make a number of different aspects while it is in Virgo. Some of them will be really helpful to the Mercury in Virgo mission. Some of them are going to try and interfere with the Mercury in Virgo mission. So I'm not saying that the whole time Mercury is in Virgo, it's all perfect. But in general, I know for me, this is the time where we will be booking upcoming travel, finalizing schedules, for my teaching, for classes. I like to do a lot of my medium to long range planning when Mercury is in Virgo because I kind of get a better sense of things than I do with Mercury elsewhere. So I offer that to you to kind of have something really helpful and constructive to look forward to through the middle part of September. That's going to be a nice counterpoint to some of the other events going on in September that are a little bit more emotional and confusing, but more on those in a future episode. Thank you all so much for joining me today. If you do want to learn about the gifts of a planet in exaltation, pop over to kellysastrology.com to register for my next webinar, which is happening live on September 14. If you can't make it live, not to worry. Everybody who registers gets a copy of the slides and the video recording. But of course, if you can join us live, we always have a great time. In the live webinar, I'll be presenting and teaching for about 90 minutes, and we usually have a good 15 or 20 minutes for questions, Q&A afterwards. Other than that, everyone, I wish you all the best for this very grounded new moon in Virgo, and I hope you are inspired by Mercury in Virgo to get a few things organized. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I'll be back to share more again next week. Until then, take care.